must heed the warning. You must heed the warning. You must heed the warning.
If the church's voice is not strong, if Christians are not strong in media, in law, in politics, then the light very quickly goes out in a nation.
I come from a land that brought this nation the gospel. My nation has turned her back on God.
실제로 제가 살고 있는 벨파스트의 큰 교회 목사님이 이슬람교는 이교도며 마귀에 속한 것이라고 설교를 했는데 이것이 이슬람교인들에게 혐오를 줬다고 해서 경찰에서 이 목사님을 소환, 조사하는 일이 일어났었습니다.
Yes. Well, it may seem very surprising, but England has moved very rapidly away from her Christian roots in the parliamentary systems and the judicial systems, and so what we have seen, and particularly with the legalisation or the recognition of homosexual partnerships, all around the issue saying that these are rights, what we've seen is that Christians, just for living out their faith and speaking out their faith, find themselves in trouble. Find themselves losing their jobs because they cannot do certain things, they cannot facilitate homosexual practice, so they lose their jobs, and so as a result of this, and other things, so Christian unions being removed from student unions, and in the melee of that, what I began to see in the mid-1990s was a huge liberalisation of the law with regard to the protection of life, to the protection of the unborn child, sexual liberation, but really sexual slavery, but increase in biotechnologies, IVF-type technologies, which made it possible for anyone to have a child, and then moving into the wholesale redefinition of marriage, which isn't just about the redefinition of marriage or giving rights to homosexuals, it's about the obliteration of family. It's about the abolition of civilization in your nation. Because God's model for life and for freedom and for family, for the flourishing of all, for those who believe and those who do not believe, is this model of a man and a woman leaving their families, cleaving to one another and having children within that construct. And of course in the 1980s that really was we still weren't into the era of rights. That was really, the change was very rapid. And I would say that from when you enshrine rights, human rights legislation, to then approving of homosexuality in law, protecting it, which is what civil partnerships does. You now say this is an approved act, and it's about the act. Once you do that, I would say you have, well, we had 10 years, but it's taken 10 years to lose almost all our social anchors. I would say if South Korea does it, then it's going to be even more rapid, because the world is getting faster and faster, and the changes happen faster and faster. But we have to remember that it then has an impact way beyond just marriage. It has an impact on children, because then comes the push to have children, which is very strong, because now you can have children because it's possible, because you can have them by way of donor sperm, you can have them by way of surrogacy, everything, you can have them by way of fostering and adoption. So suddenly everything becomes possible. Every family, there's a possibility for every kind of family, and so this is also the wholesale redefinition of what life is, and it commoditises children. You kind of hire a womb, you select a sperm donor, this kind of going, and then you deliberately deprive a child of a mother or a father. So all of this happens once you legislate in this direction. Yes, I think it's more than just the Equality Act. I mean, I think there are a lot, I think its key points will be 1967, the Abortion Act, so you don't protect the unborn child. The unborn child does not have personhood. First, 1978, first test tube baby, the possibility of creating babies out with the act of sexual union. 1972, the Matrimonial Causes Act, no-fault divorce. Also cohabitation rights, getting stronger. So cohabitation between a man and a woman, same as between a married couple. 1990, the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act allows for the creation of embryos, because we can now do it, with the express purpose of experimenting upon them and then destroying them. 2002, the possibility of homosexual couples fostering or adopting children. 2004, the Gender Recognition Act, which gives legal recognition to someone who is transgendered. 2004, the Civil Partnerships Act. And then you get the Sexual Orientation Regulations, which says that you cannot discriminate against people on the grounds of their sexual orientation. That comes immediately around the time of the Civil Partnerships Act. Civil Partnerships Act looks exactly like marriage in everything but name. They say it never will be, but it absolutely always was. And then you get to the Equality Act, which says that in the provision of goods and services, you must not discriminate on the grounds of race, sex, age, sexual orientation. And then 2010, Sexual Orientation Act, 2014, Same-Sex Marriage Act. So, and you must resist that in everything, with all that you can here in South Korea. And the reason why you must resist that is that it will be sold to you as rights, as something that's just about property, that's just about inheritance. But what it does is it is in fact same-sex marriage. We have an extraordinary situation when the Prime Minister of our country says he supports gay marriage, not despite being a Conservative. I support gay marriage because I'm a Conservative. And the Archbishop of Canterbury saying, so the leader of the church said it's clearly essential that stable and faithful same-sex relationships should, where those intent and goal want it, be recognised and supported with as much dignity and same legal effect as marriage. So the church sends a very unclear signal. And my message here is that the church must send a very clear signal about what it believes with regard to marriage, because I think that the key to our failure has been that the church has not been clear on this. The church has not spoken, and many people in our country think that the church doesn't know what it thinks about same-sex marriage. So you see that then at the Church of England Synod here you have working for the full inclusion of lesbians. So this is actually in the church meeting, and this is a woman priest marrying two men. Christian schools are being closed. So now you've got at the highest court in the land saying that sexual orientation requires fulfilment in a relationship with another person of the same sex, and this is then protected in law. Then you have a private member's bill that says that wants to abolish help for people that want to seek help for unwanted same-sex attraction. And then you get people that do that therapy, they lose their jobs. So Mike Davidson, Leslie Pilkington. We who run a Wilberforce Academy get targeted by the gay lobby. They say that we breached the Equality and Diversity Code, so we're chucked out of Oxford University. We're chucked out of the Law Society for holding a conference. They say that they will not give us a contract because we breached their Equality Code. Same with government buildings. And a politician says that she believes that marriage is between a man and a woman, she loses her position in her party. Adoption agencies, Christian adoption agencies close because they won't place children with two mums or two dads. Civil registrars who won't do civil unions lose their jobs because they're a public servant, they should do what they're told. The law says this, and they discriminate if they don't. Doctors removed from adoption panels, they have to do the health assessments, but removed because they will only want to abstain from placing a child in a same-sex household. Magistrates for stuff that they say behind closed doors that the child would stay with the foster mum and dad and not be placed with two men. He gets told by the highest judge in the land, the Lord Chancellor and the Lord Chief Justice, that he was not affected by the evidence, but by his prejudice, by his religion, and he was ordered to do equality, re-education training, to teach him to think straight. A teacher lost his job because he objected to homosexuality being promoted in schools. Lydia put into isolation at school because she had a purity ring on and wouldn't take it off. Morning after pills and condoms being given. Teacher lost her job because she told a gay colleague God was not okay with her marriage. The gay colleague asked her, and that's what she said, and she was dismissed for gross misconduct. Nursery school teachers told her to stop singing songs about Jesus, otherwise she'd lose the university grant. Foster carers lose their ability to foster because they won't promote homosexuality to children in their care. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission that intervenes in the case, which is a government body, says that these foster carers would infect the children with their Christian views. So they call Christianity an infection. Street preachers are being arrested. Police are urging the public to film street preachers, to get evidence against street preachers. Take your Christian status down off Facebook, teacher, otherwise you'll lose your job. Nurses sacked for offering prayer. Homelessness prevention officers sacked for offering the hope of healing to a sick woman. Teachers sacked. People told to take out their cross. These are all our cases in recent months. The government's submission in our cases at European level was that where the Christian is free to reside, the Christian is free to reside, so his religious freedom is protected. So Christian, your religion is not interfered with because you don't have to do this job if you don't want to do this job. So your religious freedom is your freedom to get out of the workplace, out of the square. And alongside all of this, what we're seeing in Britain, which is kind of only understood in the spiritual realm, is the rise of Islam. Huge ghettos, towns that are basically Sharia towns, Sharia courts operating. We've got about 2,500 mosques in our country, very often dominating skylines. Halal meat served in our prisons and in our schools and in our hospitals. Some restaurant chains in Great Britain only serve halal meat. We know God, but we've kind of exchanged the truth of God for a lie. We've approved the lie in the law, we practice the law, and we punish those who speak out against it. So it's a real Romans 1 picture. But somehow this ideology tolerates Islam. So we will have in our courts prayer rooms, quiet rooms, with the direction of Mecca actually fixed on the wall and prayer mats. These aren't Christian prayer rooms, they're Islamic prayer rooms. What we have done in Great Britain as the church is we have not stood up to the lie. We've welcomed the lie in. So this week there's been a church in the centre of London that has been having Muslim prayers and covered up the crosses, inviting the imam in. Can you imagine an imam inviting in the pastor? So we've had that this week. We've got gay clergymen marrying one another, two gay, locks, and nobody saying anything about it. So the question is, but how has this happened? It's because the church has been silent. And I think when I look here in South Korea and I see all these amazing Christians and amazing movements, I say, do not get too busy running your programs. Do not get too busy looking just after one another and building your ministry streams and your Bible studies and even your good works. Even your feeding the poor and going out and rescuing the prostitutes. These things are important, we've got to continue them. But if you do that and don't talk about Jesus, the government's happy. What you've got to do is engage, whilst you still can, with the government, with the powers that be, on the issues that are truth issues, that will impact whether or not South Korea stays Christian, whether or not it stays this fantastic and free and wonderful country, which it is, and that's in large part because it's Christian infused. And if not, you're looking down the barrel to England and to what we've lost. And it's because the Christians didn't speak. They were ashamed of Jesus. They were flabby. They were happy having their cups of coffee, actually did not want to come into conflict with the world, when the world was going to obliterate God's model for life, the protection of life, and the protection of family. And so my message, my very clear message, and my very clear warning to the Christians of South Korea is find your voice in the public space. Jesus doesn't just deal with individuals, he deals with families, communities, and nations. South Korea belongs to Jesus. South Korea needs to be a beacon on the hill of the world, standing against the lie that does no one any good, not even the homosexual, which is the whole freedom of homosexuality, the redefinition of marriage. This is an assault on God's model for family. And in Britain now, we're growing up with generation, with the millennials that have never heard of Jesus, really, that don't understand who he is, who've not been told about him, and who think that all the homosexuality, they just have that is just a given. That is just a given. You can't even go there. So imagine that. You're a decade away from that. Maybe even only 5 years, unless the church stops civil partnerships in a couple of months' time, and everything that flows from it. And also, with regard to Islam, makes clear that you don't accept Sharia money. Do not accept Islamic finance in your universities. Do not accept Islamic finance in your industries. Do not accept Sharia compliant finance in business. Just do not do it. If they want to do business, it has to be done the South Korean way. The strategy is, there's one strategy, and that is that the church has to be vocal and visible for Jesus, not ashamed of him and his words. And right now, today in South Korea, the church has to come out in force and resist civil partnerships, because that will lead to the redefinition of family. This is not about it's not about rights, so it's not to be taken in. You have to resist now, and if you don't resist today, it will be lost. After this, you've lost it, because it's inevitable. Everything flows from that. And the thing is, when I was in 2003 and 2, when I was working on this, people said, a lot of Christians said, it's just about rights, don't worry. And I said, no, this looks like marriage. So no, just don't worry. I said, people are going to lose their job. No, don't worry, you're scaremongering. But you know what? I was right. I take no pleasure in saying I am right, but in South Korea, you have no excuse, in a sense. You've seen what's happened to the West. And do we look happy? And does the West look happy? No, we look sad. Are our young people happy? No. They're over-sexualised. They're saturated in sex. Sexual imagery, pornography, sexually transmitted diseases, confused. It's agony. It's dark. And so the message is, now is the moment, actually. And God only has one strategy, and it's his people. And so it's whether or not his people will speak up for his name and for his glory and for his truth and for the sake, really not just of Christians, but for the sake of the civilization that is South Korea, for the sake of the nation. It's Save Korea. It's Act for Korea. The key there is that you do this in numbers. But actually, what the church has got to do is enough voices, if enough voices say, this is about family and children and what is beautiful, this is what we're fighting for. We're not against anyone, we're for everyone. But then what's going to happen is that enough church leaders have got to come out. You see, our church leaders haven't come out. So when I speak up on the television, people can say, well, she's just phobic and marginalised and extreme. Yeah, but if there are enough leaders in South Korea, Christian leaders that will stand up, and then young people like yourself involved in movements, then if you make a very big, Christians come out and make a big rally for life, rally for family, and make this very vocal and visible from now. This is what you have to do to make the difference, but you have to do it in numbers, and your people have to speak. On the day that we had the first same-sex marriages in England, it was me that appeared on the BBC, on Sky, on ITV, on every comment show. Now, that is sad, because it should have been major church leaders. So, they know they've won when it's me that's popping up as the resistance. So my message is also, you've got to keep Christians in the institutions. You must not hand over the institutions. So need Christians in education, in the university, principals of universities, in government, in law, in medicine. They've got to be very vocal and visible in all the professions. And then you've got to have the church leaders speaking into the institutions as well.